right, let's mess this up. Let's turn this into a bad meeting. Let's make this like a really bad meeting, and then we can
I hate
eject from it. And right there's our topic, right?
Okay, so I worked somewhere once, and the firm I worked at I love how, like, that's how I preface, like, "I worked somewhere once." That's it, that's all I have to say in the
Well,
story.
I mean, that's all you need to have a bad meeting.
And I've never worked anywhere ever again. No, somewhere I worked, right? The firm I worked at, we had to rate every meeting from a 1 to a 10, like, right afterwards, and if anyone said anything less than 10, everyone had to stop. We had to have a group discussion, and that person had to say why it wasn't a 10.
Oh wow.
And I mean, everyone hated that one person who was like, 8? Everyone's like, "Really?" Like, it was that kid, like, it's literally the equivalent of that kid in, like, the 6th grade who was like, "Teacher, teacher, you forgot to assign us homework." Like,
Oh,
it was
good
that.
lord.
Yeah.
Oh.
And so, yeah, I guess for most of my career, all I've had is 10 out of 10 meetings. So, I don't even know how to eject out of a bad meeting.
Oh, well, so we actually rate our meetings, some of our meetings at Four Kitchens. We use EOS, which is the entrepreneurial operating system to like run our business, to like give us a grounding. And in our level 10 meetings, which this all sounds like I'm some sort of like, I don't know, business cultist, but we have to rate the meeting between 1 and 10. And we do the same thing that you just said, which is like, if it's less than a 10, like, why not? And there's always somebody who's like, I give it a 9. It's like, okay, what can we do to get to a 10? It's like, oh, I feel like I'm reserving 10s for like the really good meetings. Like, like, come on. But you mentioned like bad meetings, and everyone has bad meetings. And I don't want to talk about your ordinary run of the mill bad meeting, like the meeting that could have been an email,
Mhm.
because like those are bad meetings. Those like strip your soul of your desire to live, but they're not like too terribly bad. What I'm talking about are the meetings that are like really absolutely like something is like going completely wrong. And an example of this is, so recently I was wrapping up a project for a client, and we had I tell you what, we write scopes of work, we talk about process, we go over things every step of the way. And for some reason, when it came to the end of the project, we were handing off designs, and the project was we were just doing visual designs, and the client was going to have someone else develop it. Okay.
Mm. Mhm.
And we're in the handoff meeting, the final handoff meeting, where I'm walking through the designs and saying like, okay, here's this. I've marked it up this way for your developer. I did this. This is, information for your developer, like showing the documentation that we had produced.
Yeah.
And the client was like, "What do you mean hand it off to the developer?" And
Mhm.
like there was like a big record scratch, and it was like, "Wait, let's talk. Wait a minute. We're handing this off to you so that you can get a developer to do this." And they were like,
Mhm.
"No, we thought you were developing it."
Mm.
And that's when that meeting went from a good meeting to a bad meeting really fast,
In a minute.
because oh my God, there was such a giant change of expectations, because we thought the project was over and the client thought that they were in the middle. I was with a couple members of like my team at Four Kitchens, and everybody wasn't really sure what to do. And like, since I was the biggest title in the room, I'm like, okay, what we need to do is I talked to them. I said, listen, I said, okay, obviously there's a mismatch in our expectations for what we're talking about today and what's going on.
Mhm.
Um, I understand that this is something that's potentially very upsetting. And I want you to know that we're going to like, what we're going to do now is we're going to stop the meeting. We're all going to get out of this Zoom meeting that we're in, and my team is going to talk internally about what's going on, and we're going to be in touch with you to try and figure out like, and meet again once we both understand where we're both coming from. Because in that meeting, like, it was just, I tell you what, my heart stopped, because like I said, I thought the project was over and they thought it was in the middle. And as you can imagine, that is a very bad place to be
Yeah.
as like an agency. And so we ejected from the meeting and we talked internally and we reviewed our scope document, we reviewed our kickoff deck, we reviewed everything. And we had been 100% clear about what was going on. And then later we got in touch with the client to finish the story. We got in touch with the client and the client is like, "You know what? You said the right things, but we didn't hear what was being said." Like when they heard like hand off to developer, your
Mm,
developer is going to do this, they thought the developer on our team, not them having a developer and needing to find
mm,
one. Ultimately, we were able to help the client get to success with that, but it was such a bad meeting. Fortunately, that client was really like they were good people, and we were able to like talk about it like adults and be
yeah.
mature. I have had some bad meetings that are not like that, and I'm sure you have too.
I have been a part of meetings where it's led to shouting matches, people crying, and those kinds of just bonkers things that you're just really and not expecting, but we're people, we're not robots, and sometimes those situations happen. And sometimes people are just flat out mean, where you feel the need to speak up, another person wants to speak over you, and now all of a sudden you want to a lot of folks when they're in those situations, you don't really feel like you want to be productive and work and collaborate in that meeting. Now you
Mhm.
feel offended because this person just put down your idea or put you down and is speaking over you. And now you have this me versus them mentality that that combative nature really just one, it cripples the meeting, but two, like what's productive that you're gonna get out of that once your emotion gets in the way.
So I run into people all the time who are internal and they are used to being kind of like kings of their domain or queens
Mm,
of their domain. They oversee like the videography, they oversee the graphic design, they oversee the design of the website, or they are subject matter experts in house, and they're amazing. They're great. And I always make it a point on a project, even if they're not on like the stakeholder list, like I make sure that I reach out to them at least a couple times during a project to like talk with them and make sure that they understand what's going on and to find out what their opinions are, because I've had a lot of bad meetings when I don't do that. Or even when I do that, there was a project. I'm not going to name the project, but there was a project where there was an in-house designer who was absolutely gunning for me. Like I was the designer on the project and I was trying to take this news organization. I'm trying to improve the visual design of it and make it like sit shoulder to shoulder where they wanted to be with like the New York Times and the Washington Post.
mm,
And I wanted to and give them their own voice. And this designer had their own ideas about what that meant. And so in meetings, they always had a voice. They always contributed just like all the other stakeholders did. But like they just completely undermined me every chance they could get outside of meetings, inside of meetings. It got to the point where they would actually private message me and send me, I don't want to say terrible messages or threatening messages, but
mm.
basically like
Oh, years.
it was really underhanded. And
Mm,
so, like, it made meetings really difficult with this person because I'm trying to, like, meet the goals of the executives and, like, I'm having this person, like, undermine me, and it was really, really tough, and so this led to bad meeting after bad meeting after bad meeting, and this person had enough, like, trust and, respect within the organization that I couldn't quite call them out in a
mhm,
way that was gonna be effective, and so I had to, like, work with my, like, account person and with our contacts there and be like, "Listen, like, this person is doing this and is undermining our process, and if you want, they can lead the process and we can just check them. Like, we're happy to make adjustments. But that's not what this organization wanted. They wanted our expertise. And it was tough. Like, eventually, I had to, like, do screenshots of some of the private messages that I received and
um,
was like, listen, I can't continue to work like this. Um, I'm just not going to be able to do this. And so, like, sometimes you have a series of bad meetings. You have to accrue a case history, if you will, to be able to say, like, there is this pattern that is problematic to the project, and like,
Fun.
how can we resolve that? And I one of the things that I want, like, we're talking about bad meetings, but bad meetings can often happen because of how people feel. And I feel like this person felt set aside, felt like they weren't respected enough because here's this outside designer who was brought in.
Yep.
And I worked my ass off to try and make sure that they were included and that they contributed. Um,
Mhm.
and it wasn't right and it wasn't enough.
I mean, this is a larger thing in play besides just the meeting. That's just how to work in a hostile environment, right? And
Yeah.
that's its own podcast, its own discussion, how to
Oh
make
my
the best
goodness.
of
Yeah.
something, when to quit, everything else. But if it's just confined to that meeting, I think there's a lot of other elements at play besides just, oh, someone's mad, right? Like some of the other
Right.
things is it could be unproductive. Why is that? There's too many people involved in the meeting. Why is that? And for myself, some things I've noticed that have really helped ensure a meeting goes smoothly is before the meeting, especially when there's a lot of people involved. Like if we were to kick off a campaign for something, okay, we'll make sure only the right people, only the necessary people are in that meeting. And if it's larger than 5 people, well, then okay, understand that you're really the spokesperson and champion. And there's a lot of people that are, it's almost like a little webinar at that point when there's 6 or 7, 8, 9 people involved. All right, well, here's what we're doing. Here's why. People can kind of ask questions along the way, but otherwise you're in presenter mode. So at least that's been a lot of my experience anyway. But even if you are trying to have this big group collaborative session, the first thing is have an agenda. And before the meeting even gets going, as you mentioned earlier, set the expectations
Oh
out
God,
the
yes.
gate. And what are the goals of this meeting? Say, hey, we're here today to talk about A, B, C, D. By the end of this meeting, we'd like to have accomplished whatever
Hmm.
G, E, F, all the way through Z. However many goals you have, we want to hit all those things. And one thing works in podcasting, it works in meetings. When you want something specifically from, and especially when there's a large group of people, say, Randy, you're here because we would really love your help and input with this. Jessica, you're here because we love going through that and helping people
Hmm.
understand, okay, we're here to talk about this. We want to get here. This is my role to help us get there, helping them think through that lens. Because one of the things that I've seen a lot, especially in large meetings, is folks that start pulling out their phones, maybe doodling, they're disengaged. And I think the biggest reason for that is a lot of folks start thinking to themselves, why am I here? And the moment someone thinks that,
Hmm.
now all of a sudden they're thinking, oh, I gotta make sure I go to Costco today. I gotta get these groceries, right?
Got to get that
Really
dollar
helping
fifty
people.
hot dog.
Yeah, like, when's lunch? Right? Like, those are the things that just those 3 things alone, I think can really help boost productivity in a meeting. Otherwise, when there's no agenda, people don't know why they're there, and they don't know what they're looking to get out of it. It's almost like, "Oh, okay, we're here to listen to this one person talk for 30 minutes, an hour."
Hmm.
And then, "Okay, I did my job because I listened to you."
I love a good agenda. Even if it's just as simple as we're getting together to talk about X today, like, that's it. Like, something simple. I like to send in advance of meetings, I like to send copies of everything that we're going to go over, and often a video walkthrough of that, because I have found that no one will willingly read anything that you send to them. If I send a document and said, "Listen, we're going to go over this 16-page document in the meeting. Please read it before coming to the meeting." They'll have it open in a browser window and maybe have skimmed it, but very rarely will have read it unless they're like the main person who is like on the project, or like it's relevant to their interests, you
Mhm.
know. And like, I get it. I don't want to read a 16-page document either.
Yeah.
But that's the way it goes sometimes. So what I'll do is I will actually walk people through the document. I even do this internally. Like, whenever I do estimates for our sales team, I will produce an estimate in our like estimating tool, and then I will record a video talking through why I added the different things to the estimate. And it
Mm,
takes like maybe like 5, 7 minutes to walk through. And I send them a copy of the estimate and I send them me talking through it because now I don't have to have a meeting telling them why I made the decisions that I did. They can just
mhm.
watch the video and share it amongst themselves. And if they have additional questions they can ask, when we get into the meeting, they know why I made my decisions. It's easier to listen to somebody like talk about it than it is to like actually like read it or even write it.
Actually, on my end, your audio and video have, like, a lot of that it froze up, and I wasn't able to hear what you were saying. And that actually it made me think of something, it's all glitchy, so it's and there's a lot of times in meetings where it basically sounds like someone's speaking another language or something you don't understand.
Hmm.
And especially once people get into that larger group setting, I think this has been said a lot, but if people haven't heard this, like, don't be afraid to speak up and ask basic questions. And for folks who are using a really large vocabulary, sometimes my experience is maybe that speaker doesn't fully understand this themselves either, where they said a true expert is able to take all of this knowledge and condense it down. So, speak to me like I'm a 5 year old, and they're able to articulate it well. So it's
Hmm.
simple. And if it's not, if whatever they're talking to you about isn't simple and you don't understand, oftentimes people they're just too nervous. I'll take notes and I'll do research later. Well, then you're not going to ask that speaker after the meeting because maybe it's your manager or whatever. You're too embarrassed to ask questions. And now it's not productive because whatever you needed to move forward on, you don't have full understanding. And maybe you try to leverage your other team members and their expertise to help you along with the gaps, but maybe they didn't get it either. But you were too nervous in that meeting because maybe you didn't want to look stupid
Hmm.
or whatever else. But there's a really good chance if you have a question on something and you didn't hear it or it didn't make sense to you, don't be afraid to say, "Hey, could you go back on that? I don't really understand it here." Or could you and if saying, well, maybe if you're too like you don't want to say I don't understand. Say, "Could you elaborate more on this?" Or "Could you help me
Hmm.
understand this?" And I think in our minds oftentimes people are like really afraid of the speaker coming back and be like, You mean you don't get it?" And the reality is if someone's saying that to you, I think it says more about the speaker than it does you for inquiring more about the question. So be brave,
Absolutely.
ask the question. Other people will probably be thankful. And I've seen that happen, whether I ask the question or someone else does. And the moment that first question happens and comes out, like 5 or 6 follow-ups, like then people are more courageous to be like, oh yeah, actually, also this and this and this and this and this. Now
Hmm.
it's collaborative, people are engaged, and you're actually moving forward with what you're trying to achieve out of that meeting. Clarity, understanding, and you're achieving those goals. So,
It's good advice. Like, and it comes down to like to fix a bad meeting, you don't always have to eject. Like sometimes it's asking questions. It's asking like clarifying comments. It is, inviting people to participate or telling people like, listen, so and so, someone who's maybe obviously like checking Slack or checking their phone and just being like, listen, if you don't feel like you need to be here, you are welcome to go ahead and leave.
mhm,
And, that's it. Like, like make sure that like you can proactively fix a lot of things before you have to eject from a meeting.
mhm,
Um, and in like the two ways to fix meetings are to fix problems when they happen, and the other one is to prepare so that you don't have problems to fix. And we talked about agendas. We talked about people knowing like why they're in a meeting, and just making sure to clearly communicate like
yep,
everything.
mhm,
Like I know one of my pet peeves with like Zoom, for instance, is that in chat, like I can paste a link, but if someone joins later, they don't see the back chat.
yep,
And so they don't have that link, which means that I have to post it many, many times. Um, and I do because every time
mhm,
somebody joins, I copy it and I paste it again just to make sure that they have it. Even though I've already put that same like link to that Figma file in the calendar invite
Yep.
and it was in the email that I sent to them, I want to make sure that everyone has like access to it. And so like all of that pre-work helps make sure that the meeting is like clearly understood and prevents a bad meeting from happening. But as I've said before, if your gut tells you that this meeting is bad, if your gut is telling you that something is wrong and you don't think that you can fix it, it is always okay to say, "Hey, we have to call this meeting. I don't feel this is going like it's obvious you thought A, I thought B. Like, I think we need to kind of like eject from this meeting and come back with an understanding so that we can move forward."
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And we talked about that right at the beginning and all throughout. Expectation setting, being on the same playing field is huge. And whether it be because of a misunderstanding that you're easily able to pivot, maybe someone has a hurt ego and they're hurting the meeting because they just flat out don't like you or they don't like something
Right.
you're saying and they're being competitive within that meeting, which again, then you're really if you're competitive, then you're not on the same team. If you're not on the same team, are you really both striving towards the same goal to get each other there, or are you just like hurting each other? So ultimately, and then too, the last big thing we talked about on this, I guess point number three is if there's something you don't understand by trying to seek that clarity, you might actually dig up something that yeah makes you eject to say, "Whoa, we didn't understand this. Our team thought we were doing this." Now, finding out when is it time to pull yourself out and say, we need to actually have, take a break, have maybe a meeting on just this topic alone, and then come back with that clear mindset. And especially a lot of the folks who are listening to this podcast are designers.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was checking my phone. Did you say something? I'm sorry.
Now I'm going to cripple this meeting.
I could not resist it. So I guess we're ejecting then, huh?
I guess that's the end because you've disrespected me and now we're enemies.
I have. Well, I tell you what, I think that this conversation should continue in our LinkedIn group. There's a Design a Good Company LinkedIn group. It has been created. It is ready to go
Yeah.
and ready for conversation. And I want to hear all about your terrible meetings and how you've handled it or maybe mishandled it. Because I tell you what, I have mishandled my fair share of meetings. I almost punched a person in a meeting. I had well, I'm not going to share that story on this, but it's like I've had a lot of bad meetings, but go to our LinkedIn group, share your stories. I'd love to hear from you.
That's it. That's this week's episode of Design a Good Company. We'll see you in again a couple of weeks, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for meeting with us. See you on the next one.